Welcome, everybody, to Dalian, the World Economic Forum annual meeting for New Champions 2017. Dalian is a port city with a great history, also a shipbuilding city. Recently built a very unusual ship, an aircraft carrier built in China, which is one of the symbols of Chinese security policy emerging that looks a bit different from what people are used to. There are many other such signs to be interpreted. Chinese ships as far away as the Baltic Ocean, exercising with the Russian Navy. Also Chinese peacekeepers around the world. China, of course, is the greatest contributor of peacekeeping troops and police among the permanent members of the UN Security Council. And in many other ways, new ideas about security contribution, also through economic development, are emerging into China's security agenda. And so that is the issue for this next 30 minutes. We're coming live from Dalian to talk for 30 minutes about China's security agenda. And the question that we're going to address is this: how will China's security policies shape the international and the regional security landscape in the coming decade? And with me to help explore this are two very distinguished speakers. First of all, President Xu from the China Institute for International Studies, and also Professor Xuetong from the Institute for International Relations at Tsinghua University. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So may I begin, President Xu, how is China's security policy going to reshape the international and regional landscape?
Oh, thank you very much. First, let me just say that it's a great honor for me to meet our distinguished guest announcer and also everybody present. The topic is an important one, yet it's a very big one. But security covers so many areas. Our institute, China Institute of International Studies, we are an institution attached to Chinese Foreign Ministry. So maybe I'll start this from the foreign policy from this narrow area. So when China makes its foreign policy in this changing world, and normally, according to the Chinese traditional beliefs, before you do anything, at least you have three elements in mind: 天时地利人和, the heaven, the earth, and the people. So in today's international relations realm, probably we'll think about what's happening internationally, what's happening at the national level, and you talk about the responses. Well, when international security is concerned, you can think about it in several categories. For instance, political security, the security relations among great powers, middle-range powers, and so on, and China's security environment, so to speak. And you can talk about national level, China's security. We can talk about the economic security, the economic situation, whether it's stable, and then you can talk about traditional security and non-traditional security. Nowadays, we talk very frequently about the threat posed by terrorism. Because during the Cold War years, for instance, during the meeting between Mao Zedong and Nixon, who talked about terrorism? Who talked about climate change? Who talks about food shortage? Because then it was the era of war and peace. This is an era of peace and development. So in the age of peace and development, when we talk about the security, the content is different. And also we have to think of the movement, development of times. Nowadays, technology plays such an important role in shaping human society and international relations. For instance, information technology. Everybody now has access to their cell phone. Even international researchers attached to the foreign ministry, we have to look at what President Trump has to say through Twitter Of course, we have to wait for a few minutes to see if there are any messages to follow by White House spokesman or the foreign service sector. So that is, I think that China in this changing world is not only responding to security questions. As China grows, it develops, her security realm also expands. National interests would expand. And in this way, as China, while participating in international forums, and then China puts forward so many agendas and then shares these with the rest of the world, like a Belt and Road Initiative, like China's initiative on cooperative security, meaning that security should not be dealt with in the old traditional way during the Cold War time, that you have so much military hardware and I have how much you have some kind of confrontation with each other. Now the new idea is that you have a cooperative security, you have a dialogue so that you lessen the worries, concerns, then you can have mechanisms for dialogues. So I think that China not only copes to security challenges, China also makes contribution so that it would eventually shape the international relations era in the realm in this regard.
Thank you very much, President Xu. That's a great idea, an expanding realm of security to start with. Now, if I could turn to Professor Yuan.
Yeah.
Your work goes far and wide in this field, but in particular, also you've brought to light how ancient Chinese thought has influenced modern Chinese power. So I wonder if you could also give us some idea about how the history shapes thinking in China about security and how it would be the same or different in the past.
The book, Ancient Chinese Thought, Modern Chinese Power, published in 2011. And in this book actually rediscovered ancient Chinese political thinking and used to develop a modern IR theory. And among all of these ancient thought, and the one concern about the security issues, the security relationship between China and the surrounding countries. Actually, there's one thought is very important by the ancient Chinese scholars, and like Sima Cuo. And he argued that, and the different powers or different capabilities can only apply for different issues. The economical capability can be applied to dealing with economic relations. Military capability can be used to shape security environment. And the political capability will determine your relationship with others. So when you ask a question, and how can we borrow this idea from ancient Chinese thought to look at the current China's capability to shaping the international environment, from understanding, and how much China can shape the regional security environment purely depends on China's military capability. That depends on how much China can modernize its defense. And for instance, if today Chinese has any single soldier, I don't think China, no matter how much money China possesses, China cannot have any influence on regional security. And that's why Japan wants to be the second largest economy for more than 2 decades. But never anyone asked Japan how Japan shaped the regional security environment, right? So today, how much China can shape the regional security depends on how fast China can modernize its defense capability.
Thank you very much. And if I could just come back on that, what are some of the advantages and maybe some of the obstacles to that rate of advance in Chinese military technologies?
Well, according to the data, including the Chinese government officially published the data, China has already have the second largest military budget. And certainly we are far from what U.S. expended on the military. But, and also, we spend far more than the third countries. And the expenditure is already over, I think, 100 billion, right? 150 billion, something like that. And so from my understanding, this, if China continue to increase the military budget regularly, and especially if China can make the military budget reach to the 2.5% of the GDP, and then China can pace up its military modernization. Just like you mentioned, we built the aircraft carrier. And from my understanding, if China wants to maintain the peace in East Asia durable, stable, and possibly we need 6 aircraft carriers. Now we have too little. So we do not have enough aircraft carrier to protect this region. We do not have enough troops, the military, modern military equipment to maintain the stability in this region. That's it.
If we imagine China in 10 years having 6 aircraft carriers and all of the supporting military force around that, how will that work in terms of what you mentioned, President Xu, of cooperative security? Because historically it's always been observed that sometimes efforts to enhance your defense by military force can create fear in the surroundings and a counter-reaction which leads to different kinds of insecurity. How can these two concepts coexist in the future of Chinese security?
Well, that's an excellent question. So speaking of world security, different countries have different circumstances and different strategies. For instance, the United States, as Professor Xuetong has said, is unquestionably the only superpower. So far as military competence is concerned, they have the largest fleet of aircraft carriers. And for military expenditure and military capacity, they are #1. And some military strategists says that United States being #1, which equals #2, #3, all through #7s put together. But what I'm saying is that you have the purpose for the United States is to maintain a leadership in world affairs. Now, when you look at China, well, China's defense policy or security policy mainly has 2 things. Of course, it has so many things, but if you put them into categories, it has 2 things in mind. One is domestic situation, the other is international. For China's domestic needs, the most important thing for China is to enhance her economic security, to build up the country's economy, raise people's living standards, so we call it comprehensive national power. So for military expenditure, it will be in proportion to China's defense needs, because we are not going to seek to be the world's #1 or to compete with the United States. Otherwise, that would be what historians or some Harvard professor would call, and that would be a realization of Thucydides' trap. So we are not going to compete with the United States for world power, but we are only here and to build up a military, to work out a defense policy so that we can have a prolonged international and regional environment so that our economy can proceed. And also, when you look at some minor powers in the region, for just now you talk about, earlier you talk about Korea, that state also has a security concern. They have a security political concern whether the regime is going to last. They also have a very important economic security concern. I think that to cut a long story short, China probably we can contribute with some other countries, contribute to the economic security of the nation. But for political and strategic security of the military security of the area, United States has an unshakable responsibility. Because when you look at the area, basically the problems are between the North on the one hand and the United States and the South on the other. So what I'm saying is that security in the world is a very complicated topic. We have to deal with the security with so many different methods, like dealing with terrorism. United States and some people in the world are saying that we can only use tough measures, tit for tat, eye for eye. But Chinese approach is that you have to deal with the symptoms at the same time. You have to deal with the essence, with the root causes. For instance, only use military power can you eradicate terrorism in Afghanistan, which I doubt about. In the long run, we have to provide the people with the education. We have to raise the people's living standards. I think that even the Belt and Road, although it can be called an economic program, in the security area, it also has its very good significance, because only by providing the people with the higher economic competence, as President Xi Jinping says that economic development is the only key to so many tough world problems.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to very briefly go back to Professor Yuan to ask your view on what President Suga said about the responsibility of others in the region, United States, but also other nations and entities, and how you see their responsibility for regional security.
Well, I think I cannot agree with him more on this argument that the regional security cannot fully rely on China. And we need a cooperation among the major powers. So for instance, and from the 2012, and the Tsinghua University established the World Peace Forum. That's the very first non-governmental high-level international conference. President Xu just attended that forum last 2 days ago. And this forum is not for the Chinese security expert to discuss about our strategy. We invited the participants from this time over more than 50 countries, and they discuss their views about the international security, regional security. And so I think cooperation is very important. But the people have a different definition about the cooperative security.
Yeah.
And for me, and some people define the term cooperative security means people cooperate with each other. But for me, I think the cooperative security means a preventative cooperation. It means that we should work for the country have a conflicting security interests and to sit together to discuss about how to prevent the conflicts from occurring between us, rather than to deal with a third party. So this is very important. I think that's why I'm strongly support the idea of cooperative security, because when there's a problem or the confrontation, major clashes there, you need this preventative cooperation. It's more urgent, and then the positive cooperation. Yeah. And second, I want to say, and actually for the major powers of cooperation for the leadership in this region, and the U.S. For a long time, or at least several decades, American undertake the dominating role in the East Asia. But now, from understanding, the U.S. already feel it's beyond its capability, and to maintain the global security. That's why President Trump said, complained that there's overburden the U.S. and they even want to shave off their international responsibility from their shoulder. But from my understanding, in the future, it's very possible. And the U.S. gave up international leadership for the global security, and no country can fill that vacuum. That means in the next few years, possibly we will experience of this kind of a scenario, the international security order without a leadership. So what does it mean? It implies that all the regional powers have to undertake some responsibility. And for instance, if you look at the situation in the Middle East, I don't think US or Russia, any of them, can undertake the leadership for this region. So you find that Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Egypt and Turkey, they start to take some responsibility for the issue. For East Asia, my argument, China should undertake more and more responsibility for regional security, and to feel this Americans' reluctance to undertake the leadership.
Thank you very much. So that was wonderful. Expanding realms, new concepts of cooperative security, new institutions to support their execution. Now I'd like to go out to the audience to see what questions you have about China's security agenda. So in the front here, please.
Thank you. I'm with a German newspaper, and I would like to ask, because there will be very neatly coming the G20 in Hamburg. And last G20 in Hangzhou, it was clear that there was a so-called consensus with a lot of problems worldwide. Now, this consensus is away. There's, from the Hangzhou time, I mean, there's not much left than the Africa policy. So is China now willing to take over this sort of lead in the Hamburg summit? Because there is no one, the Americans are not more leading the world. And everyone will ask, what is the role of China? Thank you.
Very good. And I think we'll take two more questions. A lady with the yellow jacket.
Thanks so much for your time. I'm Sophia Yan with CNBC. I was just wondering if you could both address, obviously, the big elephant in the room about North Korea and how you see the U.S., China, North Korea relations developing going forward, and what sort of risks you see that remain there. Certainly every other day it seems we have a headline that shows a bit of a standoff and kind of a sleight of hand read between the lines. So I'd be curious for your analysis on where you think this is headed next and how worried we should be in this part of the world.
Thank you. North Korea. And then, sir, at the back, please. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Velur. I work for the Straits Times of Singapore. I'd like to ask the panelists whether in your quest for your own security, you might have triggered so much regional insecurity that developing countries that need to focus on education and health are turning away, diverting their budgets to build up their militaries. And secondly, whether your actions may have contributed to Japan's current drive to be a so-called normal military. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All excellent questions. If I might start with President Xu.
Okay. For G20, I think China is a participant. When it was held in China, China had more contribution. But this time, we would expect more German input and German leadership. Speaking of European security, nowadays, probably after the new French election, people sometimes gasp, breathe a sigh of relief, because there were quite a lot of people were worried whether there would be a leadership played by the French and the German, or Germans and France in the European integration. By the way, China supports European integration, and we support more globalization. So China, in the upcoming G20, you'll see that China will collaborate with Germany. And in fact, this time, President Xi Jinping is going to pay a state visit to, shortly after President Li Keqiang, the Premier's visit, that was a formal visit to Germany in such a short, brief span of time. It shows what the importance of Germany. And then although there are forces calling for Chinese leadership in many world affairs, my personal feeling is that we are not up to, to that yet. We cannot just call ourselves a world leader because we are only one of the propellers for and the contributors for many things and many things in the world agenda, so to speak. By the way, and China sometimes says that we want to make more contribution to the existing world order and the mechanisms of global governance. That does not mean that China wants to alter or change the existing order and mechanism altogether. We are only in cooperation with other members to modify some of the unfit, rules so as to add certain elements, so as to make the world mechanisms a much better one. And North Korea issue, let me just say a few words. When you talk about the North Korean nuclear issue, I think Chinese policy is a three-pronged. Number one, denuclearization of the peninsula. Number two, peace stability is the goal for the region. And number three, the methodology towards this goal, peaceful means. For China and United States, we have a very important convergence of national interests. That is denuclearization. We both want stability, peace in the region. As regards how to realize this goal, China and United States have some differences. China says, okay, diplomatic means, peaceful means. US would say, all options are on the table. We would say, well, possess nuclear weaponry or missiles. For North Korea, it's no way out. For the United States and the South, if you want to stage a military attack against North Korea, that's not a good solution. For us, we're afraid that these nuclear facilities are so close to us, and then you want a surgical operation. What about a nuclear fallout? And what about the refugees? Just to say two events. These are also security issues. So we would like to talk with the United States. Before you push the button, have a second thought. For the three questions, I answer the first two. I leave the last, most difficult one to Professor Yan Xuetong because he's much more knowledgeable than I am.
Your generosity, President. So if agreeable, that question or indeed the previous two, we'd be very interested to hear your views.
Okay, I have no knowledge about economy, so I cannot make any comments about G20. Okay, but I only try to remind everyone here, and our President Xi Jinping once delivered a speech, and 2 weeks ago delivered a speech at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. He said that the security is the cornerstone of the development. Without security, there's no development. So I want to respond to the question why every country should spend the money on the military. And because the military provides security for your country. So that's why you need to spend the money. And if anyone suggests your government don't spend money on military, I think you undermine your national security. That's why the Singapore and it's such a city country, and you do not have very large territory, but you still built your troops, built up your armies. And so this kind of mentality is a little bit strange to me. They think that they should spend as less as possible money on military and give the money to spend the other things. Just like that, you say, okay, we do not care about my life. I don't care about the food. Right? So you need to survive. You should need to keep your life first, and then reconsider your how delicious food you eat. That's why Xi Jinping said that the security is the cornerstone of the development. Second, about the question, said that China's modernization triggered conflicts. It's also very weird, and I cannot understand how can people have this kind of judgment. And not very long ago, the Indonesia's Navy attacked Vietnam's fishing boat. Well, does this event have anything related with China? I think there's many, many conflicts in this region between two countries that had nothing to do with China. So from my understanding, actually, every country needs to spend the money on the military to protect their own security. So in that way, I think for even Indonesia and Vietnam are developing countries, they also have to spend the money on military, and because they have the maritime dispute between these two countries, which has nothing to do with China. The last question about this North Korea and North Korea nuclear issues. And I think still some people regard China and North Korea as allies. This is also, I don't know why people have that kind of impression. And China has formally or repeatedly announced that China is a non-aligned country. We have no alliance. That's an official statement. Although personally, I think that's wrong. China should make alliance with neighbors. But the government said, no, we have no alliance. We do not want to make alliance with anyone. Second, and China has formally, the foreign statesman has formally said that the relationship between China and North Korea is a normal relationship. And third, and China has set economic sanctions on North Korea. If we're allies, do anyone set the sanction on their allies? So I don't know why people still have that kind of impression, China and North Korea are allies. People say that because you have treaty. Well, I don't know. That's a treaty. You can also say that's a piece of paper.
Well, thank you both so much. One trend in the future of China's security policy seems clear, which is more and more of this kind of engagement and thinking together about how to have a security in a cooperative fashion.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to thank all the questions and thank the audience and thank the speakers. If we could express our appreciation. I'm sorry the time is up.
Thank you.
Almost finished there.
Thank you very much.
much.
Excellent.